One thing I loved about my prison career, which there wasn't a whole lot, but there's a few things that I really appreciate that it gave me. One thing is how to create systems, structured system. I worked in prison for 22 years as a guard, and there has to be a system for safety, obviously. And where I worked, the institution I worked at, the structure for safety was stellar. One of my favorite words, stellar means star. So there was a system to maintain safety, and that was our number one priority. And being a guard and having to supervise 100 men that are felons, some of them, many of them, violent felons, there has to be a system, a stellar system for little me to keep me safe. I'm little compared to them. I'm not little in my mind, however, and I appreciate that they had that. And that was my first experience with a stellar system. I grew up in an alcoholic home. My dad was a heroin addict, in and out of prison. Ironic that I ended up working in prison for 22 years. I didn't plan on that. I didn't say, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a prison guard. Matter of fact, how I ended up in prison the first time was my parents, my mom and my stepdad, they were doing these things called food sales in the prisons. They owned a deli and they took food into the prison, and they asked me to be a helper. So I agreed, and I went in to help them pass out food. Oh my God, what an experience. And even one of the lieutenants said, oh, you should work here, you should apply to be a guard. I was like, oh, hell no. So there's no way, never planned on it. But then sometime later, an ad came out in the paper for a counselor, and I was new in sobriety, and I dreamed of being a drug counselor, as many of us do. We get excited and we want to give it back, which is good. So I applied to be a counselor. And actually, I didn't want to even do that because it was prison, but my stepdad at the time said, you need to apply for that. So I did. He pushed me to do that, and I'm glad he did. And I didn't get the job as counselor because I had no experience, and I didn't look like a recovering drug addict. The president of the company, it was Walden House. I love Walden House. Everything. They when he interviewed me, he said, "What was your drug of choice? Milk." I was like, ugh. So I didn't get the job as counselor, but because I wanted it so bad, I wanted to work there so badly, because I loved that it was going to be the very first in the state of California in prison recovery program, and I wanted to work in it. It was groundbreaking, and I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to work in recovery because I was so on fire for my sobriety. I was 5 years sober at the time. And I told them that I was willing to do whatever it took. I wanted to work for them, and if they weren't going to consider me for that job, that I would sweep the floor, I would scrub toilets. I told them I was willing to do whatever it took. I just really wanted to be a part of their project, of their company. And I ended up not getting the job as a counselor, but I get called for a second interview, and I got a job as an intake specialist, where I simply interviewed at this time there was women at the prison I worked at. They ended up, they left sometime later, but now it's all men. But there was women there, and this was in the women's unit, and my job was to interview them because they had to meet certain criteria to get into this new groundbreaking recovery program in the state of California. Only 80 beds, I think it was, when it first started. And so that was my job, to create the intake office, to create a system of intake for this prison program. And I did, and I did a really, really good job. So I created a system of intake for this, the very first in-prison recovery program in the state of California, Walden House. And I loved, 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 loved that job. It was so great. However, yeah, it did end up leaving, and it was totally a God thing that, because I didn't know that the program was going to be closing some years later. I think it was 5 years later that that program moved, and I had just so happened to apply for the correctional officer position because I met this female while I was working as the intake counselor. And actually I was a transition case manager also at that job. But I met this female that was very petite, very beautiful lady that was doing the prison guard thing and doing a good job at it. And I was like, wow, like, look at her. And I had a stereotype of what prison guard was, and then she was not it. She was very small, petite, beautiful, and she was doing a really good job. And so I ended up talking to her and becoming friends, talking to her a lot. And she told me more about the job, why she did it, and then I ended up applying for it too. So especially when I heard the benefits, the state of California takes really, really good care of their employees. They really do. And I'm so grateful to them. Will be forever grateful that now I'm retired 22 years later, and they pay me for the rest of my life. The rest of my life, I get a fat check for the time that I put in. And that really means a lot to me. I'm forever grateful for that, however. But in that, I learned the importance of systems. And it is not something I learned from where I grew up or my home or anywhere else. I learned about creating systems in prison. And I know the importance of them. And in spite of that, I have failed in my own life at times. But I do have a stellar system of sobriety and a system of staying married, which is not easy. You know it. And I'm grateful to the people that get on YouTube that share their system so that I can learn. I have nowhere else to learn these things. So people that knock social media, you know what, I don't have any respect for that, because social media has every answer you could ever need. Just this last week, I'm repairing my shoulder injury from physical therapists on YouTube that takes the time to make a video. So create a system by following people that have a successful system is what I've always done. And I really, really admire people that have gone from nothing or a place of just complete disaster and created a system of success that elevated them back up. Somebody that went to prison and is like highly wealthy, successful, and free, and wow, has so many things that I wish I had. Not to covet, or I love my life. I only love my life because of the people that get on here and share how they did it too. Because I was a hope to die, dope fiend. Even though I don't look like one, I was. And I lost everything, several times, even sober. There's much more to putting the plug in the jug. And the biggest source of the places I have been successful is by creating a system. With systems, I've been able to stay married. I can stick to my word. I have 4 college degrees, 2 best-selling books on Amazon. I've been able to accomplish goals by creating systems. And the only way I do that is by following the badasses that went before me. And I am doing that myself. Now I'm entering the world. My mission is to become the best me and create a badass that you can follow too. As I know that I am today because of the people that have gone before me. And I appreciate that. So thank you for letting me share. I love you guys. Have a badass day. Create systems. If something's not working, Find someone that has a system and follow it. I love you.